Chosen one, the storm you feel isn't random. It's the sound of a false structure collapsing. When you withdrew your energy, something ancient and fragile inside that person cracked. Their obsession was never love. It was dependency disguised as destiny. They needed you small so they could feel significant. The moment you reclaimed your clarity, the illusion they lived inside began to rot from the inside out. They didn't just fear losing you, they feared being exposed by your awakening. You were the mirror they used to see themselves as powerful, chosen, superior. Without your belief, the spell broke. And now the attention swirling around you isn't praise. It's panic. People can sense the imbalance. Control always masquerades as confidence until the source of power walks away. What you experienced felt spiritual because manipulation often borrows the language of the sacred. They studied you the way predators study light, learning where you glowed the most, then dimming it just enough to keep you dependent. Every coincidence was calculated. Every promise was a hook. They mirrored your dreams, your pain, your faith, not because they shared it, but because they needed access to it. They tried to confuse your intuition because your intuition was the one thing they could never own. They tried to touch your finances and visibility because independence terrifies manipulators. A sovereign soul cannot be controlled. Isolation was never about protecting you. It was about making sure no one else reflected your worth back to you. But here's the part they never accounted for. Your awakening didn't require a fight. The moment you saw clearly, the bond dissolved. No revenge, no confrontation, just truth. And truth is lethal to illusion. Now they spiral, replaying memories, grasping for the version of you that no longer exists. The mask has slipped. The narrative has collapsed. And you, without force, without fear, have stepped into authority. You were never bound. You were paused. And now you are moving forward. For a long time, the pattern felt endless. Each time you reached for the door, doubt appeared. Each time you saw the truth, fog rolled in. You questioned your memory, your instincts, your strength. That wasn't weakness. It was conditioning. When someone has tied their sense of power to your presence, they will do everything possible to keep you uncertain, because clarity is the one thing they cannot survive. Then something shifted, quietly. Not with chaos, not with confrontation, but with light. It may have come through deep healing, prayer, therapy, rest, solitude, honest reflection, or a connection that carried sincerity instead of control. Maybe it was simply the moment you chose yourself. Whatever the form, it was real. And real energy doesn't argue, it illuminates. The moment that light entered your system, the hold weakened, not because you fought it, but because it could no longer exist in truth. As you healed, you stopped reacting. As you grounded, you stopped doubting. And without your confusion to feed on, their influence began to starve. What you're sensing now isn't power being used against you, it's desperation losing its grip. When control fails, it always escalates before it collapses. That's the noise you feel. But escalation doesn't mean effectiveness. It means exposure. What once worked no longer reaches you because you are no longer open to it. Your boundaries, energetic, emotional, psychological, are stronger than anything built on fear. You're no longer trying to escape. You've already exited. And once alignment clicks into place, it doesn't matter how much force is applied from the outside. Integrity outlasts manipulation every time. The reversal you're witnessing isn't punishment, it's correction. Energy seeks balance. Dynamics that were built on imbalance always collapse when the scales level. You don't need to defend yourself, explain yourself, or prove anything. Forward movement is enough. Growth is enough. Presence is enough. What was meant to limit you is dissolving because you outgrew it. What was meant to bind you is losing relevance because you chose truth. What was meant to confuse you can no longer reach a mind that trusts itself. This isn't about winning, it's about alignment. And once alignment is restored, everything else rearranges naturally. You're not waiting for justice, you're already walking in it. This person wasn't only attached to you, they were attached to the future they imagined controlling through you. When you stepped out of that dynamic, You didn't just end a relationship, you disrupted a storyline they were invested in. And yes, that includes the idea that you would never fully move on, never fully choose differently, never fully thrive without them. What's awakening you now is contrast. Whether this new connection is a real person already present in your life, or simply the felt sense of peace and alignment you're moving toward, the difference is undeniable. Calm instead of chaos, safety instead of vigilance, clarity instead of second-guessing. That contrast exposes how unhealthy the past dynamic truly was, and once you see that, you can't unsee it. Your ex doesn't need proof of anything concrete to feel destabilized. People who rely on control are extremely sensitive to energetic withdrawal. When you stop centering them, emotionally, mentally, narratively, they feel it as loss of identity. That's why it feels like obsession, not because they have access to you, but because they've lost relevance. What you're sensing isn't surveillance, it's projection. They're replaying conversations internally, rewriting history to protect their ego, oscillating between self-pity and blame, trying to make sense of why their influence no longer works. They created a version of reality where you were fixed in a role, dependent, available, explainable. And when you stepped out of that role, their internal script broke. That's what unraveling looks like. Not power, but confusion when power is gone. Here's the grounding truth you need to hear. You are not being watched. You are not being hunted. You are not responsible for their emotional processing. You're simply no longer participating. And the more you move toward relationships, romantic or otherwise, that feel mutual, calm, and expansive, the more obvious the contrast becomes. That doesn't mean someone is trying to stop destiny. It means you're learning discernment. The divine union here isn't a person swooping in to save you. It's you choosing alignment over intensity, peace over obsession, reality over fantasy. And that choice, that's what actually ends the cycle. When control collapses, some people escalate, not because they're powerful, but because they're dysregulated. This can show up as boundary violations, attempts to smear reputations, interference through third parties, or inserting themselves where they no longer belong. These behaviors aren't signs of dominance, they're signs of loss of emotional regulation. And here's the key thing many people miss. Escalation leaves evidence. Every inappropriate message, every unsolicited appearance, every attempt to interfere with work, finances, or relationships. Every lie told to others that contradicts documented facts. What feels like doing damage in the moment is often someone building a record against themselves. They believe they're regaining leverage, but in reality, they're eroding credibility. Patterns speak louder than stories, and patterns don't lie. About family involvement, this is one of the hardest pieces because it carries guilt. But adulthood requires a difficult truth. Shared blood does not override personal safety or well-being. Some families prioritize harmony over truth, appearances over protection. That doesn't make you wrong for choosing boundaries. It makes you responsible. You are allowed to limit information, refuse triangulation, decline conversations that distort reality, step back from people who enable harmful behavior. Disappointment is not danger. Boundaries are not betrayal. And here's something grounding and important. You don't need to dramatize or spiritualize this to take it seriously. Practical clarity is enough. If something feels off, write things down, save messages, keep timelines, avoid unnecessary contact. Trust patterns, not apologies. This isn't fear, this is discernment. Now, about safety. This matters. Most situations resolve through distance and non-engagement, but in some cases, obsession mixed with loss of control can lead to reckless behavior. That doesn't mean panic, it means preparedness. Listening to your intuition doesn't mean assuming the worst. It means respecting early signals instead of dismissing them. Protection looks like awareness, not hypervigilance, documentation, not confrontation, support, not isolation, action when needed, not silence. You don't owe anyone access to you. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone participation in chaos. Clarity isn't cruelty. Distance isn't punishment. Boundaries aren't aggression. They are how stability is restored. And the most important grounding truth of all, you are not responsible for how someone reacts to losing control. You are only responsible for how you protect your life moving forward. That's not destiny, that's maturity, and it's powerful in the most real way. Here's the truth, you weren't foolish, you were targeted. Deception works because it's strategic, not because the person deceived is weak. The moment you saw clearly, the illusion lost power. Awareness can't be undone. You don't unsee truth. What you have now isn't pain, it's discernment, and that changes everything. As you step into alignment, the shift feels undeniable, not because the world suddenly becomes magical, but because your relationship to it changes. What once drained you no longer has permission. What once blocked you no longer fits. This is how expansion actually begins. Not with noise, but with subtraction. Old connections fall away because they were built around versions of you that no longer exist. That isn't loss, it's recalibration. When your energy is no longer tied up in confusion, self-doubt, or emotional labor, it frees up space, and space invites movement. Opportunities feel clearer, decisions feel lighter, abundance starts flowing differently, not as a reward, but as a byproduct of alignment. You're no longer fighting upstream, you're cooperating with your own growth. Purpose doesn't always arrive as a dramatic calling. Often it activates quietly, through renewed creativity, sharper focus, and the courage to act on what you've known all along. You begin to trust your timing. You invest your energy where it actually multiplies. Financially, spiritually, creatively, the current changes because you change how you engage with it. What once felt blocked wasn't cursed or taken from you. It was stalled by entanglement. When you disentangle, momentum returns, ideas move faster. Resources circulate. Support shows up in more grounded, sustainable ways. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're building from it. About the past, when someone loses access, not just to you, but to influence, they often notice the absence. That doesn't mean surveillance or obsession. It means relevance has ended. People who relied on proximity to feel powerful struggle when growth happens without them. But that struggle is theirs to process, not yours to manage. The important truth is this: your rise is not a reaction to anyone else. It's the natural outcome of choosing clarity over chaos, integrity over intensity, direction over distraction. Whether anyone watches or not becomes irrelevant, because your life is no longer oriented around being seen. It's oriented around being well. You're entering a season where effort feels cleaner, where progress feels earned, not borrowed, where peace becomes productive instead of passive. Nothing is being taken from anyone. Something is simply being returned to you. And once alignment locks in, it doesn't ask for permission. It just moves forward. This is the beginning of your breakthrough, but not because someone else is losing. It's because you're no longer at war with yourself. Protection doesn't always look mystical. Often it looks like clarity, like discernment, like finally trusting your own perceptions and acting accordingly. Alignment isn't about fate choosing you. It's about you choosing honesty, responsibility, and self-respect over confusion and chaos and freedom. Freedom is what happens when you stop negotiating with what harms you. What comes next isn't escape, it's construction. You heal because healing restores your capacity. You build because building gives your life direction. You protect your peace because peace is not passive, it's a resource. When you stop feeding old dynamics, they resolve on their own. Some people will struggle with that internally, others will move on quietly. Either way, their process is no longer your assignment. Growth doesn't require witnesses, rivals, or villains. It just requires consistency. The real victory here isn't ascending while someone else falls. That keeps you tethered. The real victory is becoming unreachable to patterns that once ruled you. When you're no longer reactive, no longer explainable to chaos, no longer available for manipulation, that's when life opens. Breakthrough looks like clearer thinking, stronger boundaries, better decisions, sustainable progress, relationships that feel mutual instead of consuming, and yes, momentum builds, financially, creatively, emotionally. Not because the universe is punishing someone else, but because your energy is no longer leaking. Here's the truth that actually lasts. You don't win by defeating anyone. You win by becoming stable. You win by becoming self-led. You win by living a life that doesn't need drama to feel meaningful. Walk forward, but do it grounded. Heal, but do it honestly. Build, but do it patiently. Protect your peace, not because you're chosen, but because you're responsible for your life. And the ending that matters isn't cosmic, it's practical. People who choose clarity, integrity, and growth always end up better off, not because of destiny, but because reality rewards alignment over time. That's not mythology. That's how real freedom works. This chapter is closed, not because you fought harder, but because you saw clearly. And clarity changes everything. What once had power over you dissolves the moment you stop feeding it. You don't need to look back, explain yourself, or wait for validation. Your life is moving forward, and alignment will do what force never could. So walk on, heal what needs healing, build what was delayed. Protect your peace like the sacred resource it is. Let consequences sort themselves out while you focus on expansion. This is how real breakthroughs happen, quietly, steadily, inevitably. If this message resonated, it's because you're already awake, and awakened people don't lose, they move on. Subscribe if you're walking this path of clarity, growth, and alignment. Stay grounded. Stay aligned. I'll see you in the next chapter.